Good afternoon and welcome to the Stratus Admissions Counseling and Beat the GMAT webinar. Today we are talking about December tips for round 2 applications. You're here today with myself, Susan Cera, and my colleague, Harold Simansky. And we're going to just wait a couple minutes while folks are continuing to join us. And in that time, I want to ask a couple of questions just to get a sense of who is with us today. So if you could take the time to answer these questions, it would be very much appreciated. The first question is, where are you located? Where are you sitting in the world today? I am in the eastern part of the U.S., east of the Mississippi. And it's cold here today. I'm in North Carolina. It's not unseasonably cold, but we've had some really warm weather recently. We've got answers coming in. We've got about a quarter of people are in the U.S. east of the Mississippi. We've got about half of our audience is in Asia, and then 10% in EMEA and 10% in other. If you are one of those other people, put in chat where you are. I'm always curious. I end up having some Canadians in there, occasionally someone in South America, or trying to think of where else. I had someone put in South Africa. Technically, that's Africa. So anyway, that's who's with us. Now we're up to like almost 70% in Asia. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to close out this poll. Ask another one. How many years of work experience do you have? You know, as you probably know, the average year's work experience at all the top MBA programs is somewhere around 4 or 5 years of work experience. If you have fewer than 3 years of work experience, you really need to demonstrate why now is the right time for you to be getting an MBA. Similarly, if you are a more seasoned professional, business schools are going to want to know why you didn't want to go back to school earlier in your career. We've got votes coming in here. Thanks for taking the time to answer. We've got about 20% have less than 3 years, about 30% have 3 or 4 years, about a quarter have 5 to 6 years, and 30% have more than 6 years. So thanks again for answering that. One last question before we jump in here. Are you a reapplicant? Did you apply last year to business school, or perhaps prior to that? Nothing wrong with being a reapplicant. This is a tough process. There are a lot of people who don't get in on the first time. So we've got most of the votes in here. We've got about 90% say no, they are not, they're first-time applicants, and then about 10% say they are reapplicants. So we just want to know so that we can address that throughout. So thanks for your answers here. We close out this poll, and again, just to let you know where you are. You are at the Stratus Admissions Counseling and Beat the GMAT webinar. And today we're talking about December tips for round 2 applications. I'm Susan Cera. I want to introduce you to my colleague, Harold Simansky, who's going to introduce himself. And the two of us are going to be tag teaming this presentation with you. So with that, Harold.
Thank you very much, Susan. As you can see, my name is Harold Simansky. I am a graduate of MIT Sloan. I did a couple of years at Bain & Company in the private equity group, and then I went off and did some of my own things. I've been doing a number of startups for, a period of years, and I got reconnected with Stratus, probably a couple of years ago, and really because they do some great work, and I wanted to participate in that. I still have some other things going on, including working for a private equity firm, one in particular, doing some due diligence for them. But as I describe myself, I think the most important thing to remember about Stratus is we really are a team. So whether it's me working with you directly, if you're applying to MIT, I will be part of that process. If you are, even though I may not be your counselor, if you have a private equity background, I will certainly be part of that process. And one of the key members of our team who you will have some contact with is my colleague, Susan Cera. So Susan, I'm going to pass it back to you for your own introduction.
Yeah, so I'm Susan Cera. If you've been to one of our webinars before, you've heard my voice. I'm the director of MBA admissions counseling. I did my undergrad at Dartmouth, where I studied economics and computer science, worked in consulting for a few years before going back to business school to get my MBA at Duke's Fuqua School of Business. I then kind of did a career change into the e-commerce and software space. So think tech product management, but 20 plus years ago when it wasn't as cool as it is today. I then kind of shifted my focus away from that career track to focus on my family. And during that time, joined Fuqua's admissions committee, where I spent about 10 years reading thousands of applications. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to join the Stratus team and realized this was a great opportunity to help clients or candidates present their best selves. Because during my time at Duke, I realized that a lot of people applying to business school really didn't understand what was expected of them, and they were probably a lot stronger than they were presenting themselves. So a little bit of background about Stratus. We've been around for a little over a decade. Every year we work with tons of candidates and get acceptances. As Harold alluded to, we do take a team-based approach. Another thing that's very unique to us is we offer a 4-school guarantee. Unfortunately, for those of you who are applying in round 2, it's too late. We require that you start with us at least 50 days before your first deadline, and we're now within that 30-day window. So at this point, we can't offer that guarantee. But if you are right now making that go, no-go decision and decide to wait until next year, get signed up with us now, and we'll guarantee that you will get into one of the 4 schools you work with us on for round 1. And if you don't get in round 1, we'll turn around and help you in round 2. And with that, let's talk about Are You Ready? And Harold's going to talk you through these while we do some more polls. So pay attention, because this is some interactive stuff here. So.
Well, thank you very much, Susan. And for those of you who have looked at their calendar, it's already December 7th. The first set of applications that are due is Harvard Business School on January 3rd, which is almost exactly 4 weeks from today. So I think everyone now has to have a very realistic view of not just will they apply, do they want to apply, but the quality of their application or their candidacy altogether. The first thing is, quite simply, have you taken the GMAT? Have you done on it about the best job you think you can? And maybe more relevant to your decision to apply is it within the 80% range of that particular school? Because if it is, that's certainly a green light. If it is not, then maybe you want to consider either doing some more GMAT work or possibly even taking the GRE. Do you at this point have a final school list? Do you know where you're going to be applying to? Have you started actually completing the online applications? Because these are very tedious, they are somewhat hard to do, and we always encourage people to jump right on in. Maybe the biggest issue with regard to time and timing is your recommenders. Have they started actually writing recommendations for you? Have you even asked them to? And if the answer is you haven't even asked them or haven't even identified who you want to ask, then that is not a good sign. In fact, that is likely to be a red line. A red light rather. And then there's some other things. Do you have official copies of your transcripts? And how confident you are as a writer. And I think this is a really important point here. At the end of the day, the core of your application is going to be essays. Essays that where we live now in terms of this, just how rigorous the standards are for business schools, how difficult it is to get into many of these business schools, if not all. Can you write a good recommendation, not just in terms of syntax and grammar, but in the story you're going to tell and how that story leads to business school? If you're not confident in doing that, then again, that's probably a red light. What I would certainly say is, as you look at all of these questions, if you start saying no or red light to more than one of them, then I think it is probably worth considering, certainly considering, but actually you may be better served by waiting and doing a much better application by round 1 of next year is likely to enhance your chances quite a bit. And with only 4 weeks to go, this decision has to be made now, whether you're going to go forward or whether you're not.
So, are you finished there, Harold? Because I was going to jump in.
I'm sorry. No.
So, Harold's absolutely right. We asked 6 questions. Harold went through them very quickly, so I only did polls on about 4 of them, I think, and I've got some yeses and no's on quite a few. Like I'm looking at the recommendations. Are your recommenders confirmed? 63% of you said yes, and 38% no. If you fall into that no category, I understand that many of the folks in our audience are in Asia, but here in the US, what we say to those who are asking a recommender like this week to write them a recommendation that's due in the next 4 weeks is kind of like gifting someone with a fruitcake for Christmas, which is not something that people like here in the US. Maybe if you're in England, you might want a fruitcake, but in the US, it's kind of, something that you give to someone you don't like. So with that, Harold talked about if you have said no to a few of these things, you might want to consider waiting a year. And I put up on the screen a quote from a client who I worked with starting about 18 months ago, and he transitioned to working with another counselor to do his applications in round one. Yesterday I got, I'm getting goosebumps right now, but he was admitted to Chicago booth yesterday. And what he had to say was, this process has shown me how competitive and tough it is to get admitted to a good program. And the number one thing you can do is start really early. Okay, so if you are answering no to these questions, it doesn't mean you should put the brakes on and wait until July to do anything. It is, hey, let's get these things done and move forward. And we have a product called Early Edge that you can talk about with us. With that, if you've said yes to most of them, it's go time. And you've got less than 30 days to get your work done. So here's what we have to do. I'm going to walk you through each of these areas, and Harold and I are going to go back and forth. You need to be able to talk about why you want an MBA. Your goals need to be clear. You need to understand specifics of the programs that you're applying to. You need to be able to tell a unique and compelling story. You need to make sure that your resume has been updated for business school. And throughout all of this, you need the support of a trusted advisor, someone who can count on to guide you, answer questions, provide feedback. So with that, Harold's going to talk to you about the 3 whys of business school.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. No matter who is applying to business school, you always have to start off by answering these 3 questions. Why do you need an MBA? Why is now the particular time that's going to be best for you? And the final question, frequently is not one that people think of to the degree they should, is why this school? Because the reality is every business school is different. There are nuances there. And about the worst thing you can do is write an application that is the same for Harvard versus Stanford. They're much different schools. And that's a real red flag. So what I would say now is whether you make that go or no-go decision, you must really be doing a lot of research into these schools, talking to people about them and really getting to know them, and reflect that in your essays and on your application. But these really are the questions that you need to have answered now if your intention is to apply for round 2 of this year. And with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about what your goals may be. And Susan, maybe I'll have you pick up there.
Yeah, so one thing that is kind of part of that why MBA is that you have a goal. You have actually multiple goals. You have a short-term goal and you have a longer-term goal, which is the reason why you need an MBA. And your goals need to be clear, meaning I want to go into consulting or I want to go into private equity. These are not goals that are clear. It needs to be more specific. Like, I want to be a product manager in a technology company that is working in the business to consumer space. Much more specific, such as this company or that company. Your goals need to be achievable, meaning that the experience you have to date leads you to an MBA, and when those 2 things are combined, it makes sense that you could get that short-term post-MBA dream job. You also need to be able to present a long-term kind of career aspiration. What is that goal for what you're doing 15 or 20 years from now? And how does that short-term post-MBA job lead you to that that longer-term career aspiration? Business schools realize that once you hit the ground in their program, chances are you're going to learn something new, be exposed to something different, and your goals may change. Therefore, they like to see that everyone has a plan B. In the event that you're not able to get that product management job in a technology company that's working in the business to consumer space, what's plan B? Think about that. Make sure you have an answer to that question. And if you don't, again, you may not be the right time for you to be applying. Harold, anything to add on goals before we move forward to our next slide?
Sure. When I think about goals, I always make the analogy to an equation. In terms of you've done A, you've done B, then you go to business school, and then you want to do C and D. And what I really mean by that is it has to be clear that what you've done in the past leads to business school and then leads to your goals beyond that. So if your thought was, I'm going to go to business school and then become an astronaut, that won't make a lot of sense. It won't make a lot of sense, certainly to professionals in the space, to other astronauts, but it certainly won't make a lot of sense for business school. For some of you, the trajectory may be very clear. For others, you're going to maybe need to take some time and understand what it will take and the steps you need to take to be the CEO of Pepsi Cola, for example. In different business schools are going to have their own thought about things, view of things, and different nuances. So this is something we can't stress enough, which is getting very specific about why a school, in terms of its curriculum, its culture, the clubs, even cost, as well as understanding who the people are there and making connections to them. So with this idea here of getting to know each school, probably the place to start is with your own network, the connections that you have. So whether that's, actual family members who may have gone to these schools or folks that you work with who went to these schools, understanding how these schools see themselves, the vocabulary they use when describing themselves. And this will take a lot of effort. You need to then go beyond that and start connecting with people who are recent alumni. You looked at your LinkedIn, connecting with people who are still students there, maybe some club presidents. For example, if you're interested in financial technology, wouldn't be bad to talk to the FinTech club president to understand what's really happening at the school. And if there's one thing that is most sensitive to time, it is this idea of school specifics information, of gathering that, of doing that research. And it's really the first thing to go. So as your timeline becomes compressed, this is where we really see a deficit, because this is unlike the rest of the application. You have to go out and really try to speak to people. And for many people, this is very, very difficult, off-putting to do, but it is so imperative. You also need to speak to how each business school is different. And sometimes that'll manifest in curriculum. Clearly, how they're teaching about the media world is different at NYU than it is at Harvard, just given NYU's central, location in the media capital of the world, we say here, as well as how they teach. So for example, Harvard Business School is known for the case method, where you're given small vignettes of a problem in the business world, and you're asked to respond to that. And that is one type of teaching. And then other teaching may be much more lecture-based, much more experiential, getting you out of the classroom. It's important that you understand that. Also, one way of really getting to know a school is by seeing what the students are doing outside of the classroom. And that really will also speak to, what are students interested in it? What are they keeping busy on? How are they approaching a particular industry? If you're interested in financial technology, then Columbia has a great FinTech club, and they do all sorts of conferences. They do treks. They bring groups of professionals on campus. If you're interested in financial technology and you go to a different school, maybe a place like Georgetown that doesn't even have a club, well, what does that speak to? Maybe Georgetown isn't the best fit for you. And that really gets to this idea too of, is this particular school a place where you can find your people? If you're somebody who likes wearing t-shirts and shorts, then maybe Harvard Business School with its Oxford and khakis isn't the place for you. If you go to visit Stanford and Berkeley, you're going to see much different cultures there. One may be more appealing, one may be less appealing. And frequently, the only way to know is go, and I say, breathe the air. When I was looking at business schools, I was looking really all over the place. I walked into MIT, I met with a few people, I smelled the air, and I knew that was the place for me. And I think that's the experience of a lot of people. And Susan, I remember you had a similar experience when you were choosing Duke as your business school.
Yeah, absolutely. I like you, had traveled kind of all over the country visiting different schools. I crossed some off my list after visiting, but I remember being at Duke and feeling so welcome, and just realizing that was going to be the right place for me.
Absolutely, and it is real, it's palpable, and it's something that you only will get that understanding of if you really research each school, talk to people there. Are these your people? You know, the final thing that we certainly encourage people to think about when choosing a school is cost. And we recognize these schools are very expensive. The reality is it could end up costing you $200,000 to $300,000 without even taking into account the opportunity cost. So this is really going to be driving a lot of your decisions. And it's something not to shy away from. And in particular, while we all know the top 5 or 10 schools, there's also a whole cadre of schools that are really very aggressive in terms of getting the students they want, in terms of getting them scholarships. So at many of these schools, the sticker price and the price that people pay can be quite different. And both Susan and I have had experiences where we've had clients who ended up at places like Indiana or have ended up at places like Vanderbilt because they were given a lot of money to do that. And the end result, you know, has always been good. Clearly, the whole value proposition changes if you're going to business school for free. And maybe based on what you've done, and that's interesting, and maybe the school that you're looking at, certainly a partial scholarship, if not a full scholarship, including for international students, is certainly a possibility and worth investigating. So
yeah,
with that,
absolutely.
Yeah. So with that,
so I'll jump in
yep.
on kind of building off those school specifics for developing your compelling narrative, and it really needs to be compelling. You know, Harold hasn't had the opportunity to do this, but I spent 10 years reading applications, and you know, I would spend sometimes hours at a time, and there were times when everything just started looking the same, and it was just so boring. So what I was looking for as a reader who was going to go and, you know, raise my hand and fight for someone to be admitted was people who are going to tell me a really unique and compelling story, engage me from the first sentence. I occasionally would write on my notes, you know, I laughed, I cried, it was better than cat. You know, if you can touch the emotions of the people who are reading your applications, you've really done a great job here. And how do you do that? You need to identify key themes. So things about yourself that you want to present through your application. And it may be that you are, you know, someone who brings cross-cultural awareness to the program, or perhaps you are a resourceful problem solver. Perhaps you are an inspirational leader. What in your past experience highlights these themes about yourself? So what are your passions and interests that that form your goals, and connecting all those pieces together? And on top of connecting them together, connecting them with the school, and as Harold just spoke to, the resources that are available at a particular school. Almost, you know, probably about 50–60% of the programs have in their essays, you know, kind of essentially the why Stanford. They want to know why their particular school is the right place for you to go. Like the worst thing that you can do if you're trying to do 4 applications between now and the first week in January is to write one set of essays and think that you're going to use them across all 4 schools. In the best case scenario, that's going to be the right set of essays for one school. In the worst case scenario, you will have watered everything down so much that you have bad essays for every one of the schools. You need to speak to your aspirations, you know, connect perhaps a personal story, something that happened to you in your childhood that informs the direction you want to take your career. And again, make those connections between your hopes and dreams and how a particular school can move you forward towards those through the curriculum, the club. You know, how is that particular school going to help you to develop the skills, the knowledge, and even the relationships that you need to help you reach your goals? And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Harold. And just one thing to note, if you guys have questions as we're going, please put them in. We will be doing some Q&A at the end, but feel free to put in some questions now so that you're not scrambling at the end. So Harold, off to you.
Great. Well, as Susan was just talking about compelling narrative, a big piece of the narrative, a big piece of the picture that you're trying to paint of yourself is absolutely going to be your resume. And what really has to happen, certainly with an application that is going to be top tier and merits acceptance, is you have to be creating one picture of yourself. So you have to say in your essays something that is complementary to what's in your resume, which is complementary to what the recommendations are saying. My own pet peeve is that when I read an essay that has one really fantastic example and really shows maybe an example of you as a leader, as a team member, or really a very big accomplishment, and then I look at the resume and I cannot find it there. And again, an essay and a resume have to work very closely together so that really what we're talking about here is a single picture of who you are that is going to be attractive to the admissions committee members. Also, resume sometimes does double duty. When you go to be interviewed, frequently, and probably the majority of the schools, the interviewer has not seen your application. They will only be looking at your resume, and really only for maybe the first time when you get there. So you have to tell a story on your resume that really is a summary of who you are presenting yourself as. So what certainly makes for a good resume? Clearly something that is engaging. Just like a good essay that you'll really be excited to read about this person, to get to know this person based on some very interesting things on their resume. So we love to see really the edges of your resume can make a difference. What do you do in your spare time? Beyond that, also, your resumes always talk about accomplishments, except a good resume doesn't talk about it in very general language. It talks about very specifically. Numbers are good on resumes. I helped cut costs by $50 million. I increased revenue by 13%. This idea here of true impact has to be specific, and that's what makes it credible. So what I frequently tell people is the resume, it has long been considered the stepchild of the application. So you're going to end up dusting off the last resume you wrote maybe a couple years ago for a job. And the resume you write for employment is much different than the resume you write for business schools. And as we talk about only 4 weeks left before you have to start submitting these applications, even if you get your essays written, which obviously anyone can do if they work hard enough, what again falls down is your resume. And your resume has to be taken seriously, and that means you have to spend time on it. That means you have to pass it by a number of people to read. That means you have to have it proofread. It is an undertaking on its own, and now's really the time to start recognizing it and certainly working on it. And
Great.
that brings to this idea here. I'm sorry, Susan, who can you get some feedback from? Who's going to help you in this process?
Yeah, one more thing on resumes. I've read a lot of resumes, both in my role now as, and people come to us with kind of the last resume they wrote to get their job and maybe put a few bullets on for what they've been doing since they started their most recent job. But one of the biggest things, I see, and we do have a very large percentage of our audiences in Asia, having read Indian applications for 5 or 6 years, I honestly do not care how you did on the joint entrance exam. No one cares. No one cares how you did in high school or what you did in high school. It's really completely irrelevant at this point. So be thoughtful about what's on your resume. It really needs to be one page, and it should be from college moving forward and nothing beyond that. They don't need a picture of you. They don't need to know your marital status. None of their business. All right, so with that, who do you trust to help you with this throughout the whole process? You really need someone who can provide you insight and feedback. Someone who has experience, not just in the workplace, but people who have experience looking at essays, looking at resumes in the context of a business school application. Because as Harold said, that resume that might have gotten you your last job is quite possibly not the resume that's going to get you into business school. You need someone who's knowledgeable about the MBA application process. What are those, nuances of, what order you put your extracurricular activities in that online application, and what really is the most important outside activity you've been involved in the last 10 years of your life. You need someone who's going to be responsive. A lot of candidates say, oh, yeah, I've got a friend who's in business school and he's going to be home on Christmas break, so he'll help me. You know what? The last thing that your friend who's in business school wants to do over their Christmas break is read business school applications. They're not going to be responsive. They're going to want to be, either focused on getting their summer internship for next year or spending time with their family and friends. You want someone who's going to be supportive and encouraging, and also someone who's available. So with that, that points to, how can Stratus Admissions help you right now? Your clock is ticking. 28 days until these applications are done. I had a conversation this morning with a woman who's signing up to work with us for 5 hours. MBA applications are complicated. I'll put up this cartoon that I saw recently. About 10% of our attendees, when we asked, were reapplicants. I can't tell you how many candidates we work with each year who applied last year on their own without help. And they thought, oh, no, thanks. I'm okay. I've got this. And the reality is, even with 5-10 hours of support, you can change those square wheels into round ones and get yourself admitted. I had a client I worked with on an early decision application a couple months ago. He had attended one of my webinars last fall, thought he could go it on his own, came up empty-handed, came back to me in August and said, I need help. I didn't get in last year. And you know what? When he got the admit call, the admissions officer who called him said, we were so impressed by how much stronger your application was this year than it was last year. Don't be that person who thinks they can do it on their own. If you are applying in round 2, there are a lot of moving parts, tight schedules, and nuanced decisions that are going to take place over the next 4 weeks. Get the help you need to get through submissions. Stratus is offering now, if you purchase 8 hours with us before December 15th, you can get it for $2,018. Go online to stratusadmissions.com/R2LastChance and sign up to move forward with us. If you have gotten sufficiently freaked out by what Harold and I have shared in the last half hour, 40 minutes, and you realize, I don't think I'm ready, still reach out to us. Perhaps wait until next year, but reach out, schedule a consultation with us, and learn what it would be like to work with Stratus. If there are things in your profile that need some tweaking, we can guide you on that decision-making process. I've got a call tomorrow with a guy works at one of the top 3 consulting firms in the world, trying to make a transition into private equity. He's been working with us for the last 2 years to develop his profile for business school. Having a conversation with him tomorrow about what direction is he going to go? Stick with this consulting firm or go into private equity for a year before applying to business school? So again, reach out to us, stratusadmissionscounseling.com, R2LastChance, or shoot us an email on consult@stratusadmissions.com. And we do have, as we said, a great team of people. Unfortunately, with the limited time we have left between now and the deadlines, really all we can offer to people for round 2 is hourly support, and that doesn't come with kind of the team component. But we've got a great team of counselors who are available and ready to help you to put those last touches on your essays and your applications. And with that, I'm going to leave you with this quote here, and I'm going to open it up to questions for myself and Harold. So if you have any, I know some people have asked some here. Mihir wants to know if we're going to have a recording of the webinar. Yes, that will be sent out to you probably in the next day or so. My colleague at Beat the GMAT is recording this, and he will get it along to us, and then we will get it out to you. I will ask Harold to cover this one. The question is, a lot of MBA programs ask how you can contribute to the MBA program. How do we contribute to the MBA program?
Great question. And the answer is nobody knows until they do school-specific research. At the end of the day, each school is different in terms of what they do outside the classroom and inside the classroom. If you have, coming back to financial technology again, just because it's such a hot topic, if you already have fintech experience, that is great to bring to the school and really help them understand that not only can you bring to school some of your technical knowledge, but maybe you even already have a network of people that you can bring in to help plan a conference, or speakers you can bring in. I think it really is an issue of what value can you add to your teammates. And again, value can be added in many different ways. We had a client fairly recently who is a boxer. And he talks about maybe, bringing a boxing club or creating a boxing club, at that particular school. Well, that's exciting. That's interesting. And on the one hand, you'd think that this idea of adding value would just be inside the classroom, but it's not. Business schools are really building small communities, almost like a small little town. And they just want to make sure that all the town members, all the citizens there are going to be able to bring something that makes everyone better and everyone smarter. So again, the place to sort of understand that best is understand the school very, very well. Understand what people like to do. I was at University of Washington Foster about a year ago. Great business school. If it's not on your list, it should be. Seattle's a great place. They have wonderful relationships with the Amazons, Microsoft of the world, but they're very upfront and they say, listen, we're a school that likes to spend time outdoors, that quality of life is very important to us. So how can you add to that environment? Well, what's clear is if you're someone who likes snowshoeing, and when the winter hits, you can take your classmates snowshoeing, that is absolutely terrific. It's something they would respond to, but you're only going to know that if you get to know these schools very, very well. And Susan, I know you've had clients who have sort of taken this question on from the side, if you will, maybe not quite as common as other people have, who maybe just spoke to what they can talk about in the classroom. Maybe like many, maybe they have some finance skills, so they can bring that to their teammates. Well, a lot of people can do that. How are you going to be unique?
Yeah, and one thing to add on that is not just like the finance skills and such. We have probably a lot of international people on this call. If you are an international person who has immersed yourself in another culture, you have that experience that you can bring, because many of your classmates at any of these schools will be coming to the US into a new environment for the first time. What might you be able to share with them to help them to make that adjustment? What do you know about your culture or some other cultures that will help to draw out perhaps the voices of some of your classmates who might be introverts, and you perhaps have skills that will make it easier on them to share their voice in either a team situation or in a classroom situation. It doesn't have to be leading, the entire student body, but you need to think very specifically about the contribution that you would want to make to any school. And as Harold noted, it comes down to doing your research about that school. All right, hopefully that answered your question. We've got another question here of, this individual, Aditi, is a professional blogger as an extracurricular activity. How much of a difference does that make? Let me jump in here. I don't know what you blog about. It could be something very interesting. If you have a huge following, that could be rather compelling. And to relate back to that previous question of a contribution to the school, perhaps you can become one of the student bloggers at the school. Many schools have student blogs to share a variety of different voices of what life is like in that campus. So with that, Harold, let me know if you have anything to add.
The only thing, the only thing that I would add is great experience. I want to hear about in your essay. I want to hear about not just what you do, but also why it's meaningful to you. I think that's really an important piece of it. And Susan and I have had conversations back and forth about what the perfect candidate is, who's going to get into Stanford. And there's a swimmer at Stanford, Maya Dorado, who is multiple gold medal winner. And Susan assures me she's a shoe-in, perfect score, underrepresented community, gold medals. And I joke with her, nobody's perfect. In my own class, I had an Olympic rower. I had someone who not only played professional football, but also was a classics instructor at a very fine prep school, African American. So anything that you do that you think is special may in fact be very special, but there is no gold ticket into any business school. And again, I don't care who you are, Olympic medalists are there already. But I think what you really need to make clear is why what you've done that is terrific, why it is meaningful to you, as well as how does that enhance the lives of your classmates while you're there. So again, wonderful experiences. Tell me more about it, but also tell me why it's important and why is it going to be important to your classmates as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Harold. We've got another question here from Bridget. What are the top 3 most common mistakes people make on their essays? I think this is a great question. I'm going to give my top 2 or 3, and then I'll leave it to Harold. Give him a chance to think about this. Top 1 mistake is not answering the question. Telling a story that you want to tell with disregarding what was asked of you. Kind of on top of that is when asked about goals, reflecting too much on your past rather than being forward-looking. I see that a lot of people. A lot of questions will ask, and this reflects back to the question earlier about how do you contribute to a particular MBA program. Many of these schools want you to be forward-looking, and I've seen a lot of essays that are talking about past accomplishments. And then the third biggest mistake is kind of actually, I'm going to do an easy one here. Poor proofreading, where you submit an essay that has, a misspelling of either the school you're applying to or it has some other school's name in it. I've seen it. It does not end well. As our colleague Donna will say, it's a fast pass to the ding pile. So with that, Harold, I'll let you add your top 1, 2, or 3, if I haven't already touched on them, common mistakes on essays.
And Susan, I also have to pull out my classic example on the Columbia Business School essay. If you write Columbia, Colombia, which is the name of the country Columbia and how it's spelled, immediate rejection, as opposed to Culombia. And, we joke about that, but it's amazing what we've seen in terms of proofreading, and not just in the essays themselves, but over the course of the whole application. So that's why we always recommend you print out a PDF of it of your application before you submit, and you check it. With regard to, I think, one of the biggest mistakes that people made when writing their application is Susan already touched on it, is not being specific about the school. Is this idea here of one business school is just like the other, and that's absolutely not true. And in fact, business schools are really on the lookout now for people who understand why they're attending their particular business school. So you have to need to talk credibly about that. And that manifests itself in many different ways, including the essays. Stanford and MIT, will ask you, what have you done? What do you want to do? And as most business schools have, but the reality is MIT is not a place that wants a lot of stories about the future. MIT is a past is prologue sort of place, meaning share with me your successes. In some ways, I don't care what you'll do in the future. If you've been successful in the past, then I am fairly certain you'll be successful in the future. So an MIT essay will read much different from a Stanford essay, which is all about aspirations. The Stanford tagline is change lives, change organizations, change the world. So you have to write for them a big picture essay, and an essay much different from MIT. So I think if you get to know the schools, if you get to know them very well, that really will make a difference in terms of how your essay and application is received. And that alone can really take you out of the big pile of applications sitting on the admissions committee member's desk and get you into that small pile where they will take you very seriously and really read all that you have written and worked so hard to do.
So great, thanks. Another thing I'll add on common mistakes on essays is just, not having clear goals. That's something that we spend a lot of time working with our clients on, making it specific enough that if 4 different people reading your essays, they all are thinking the same thing that you want to do. I want to be a product manager. I don't know. Do you want to go be a kind of a brand manager and work at a consumer packaged goods company, or what exactly do you mean by that? 4 different people reading, I want to be a product manager, could think 4 different things. So, the clarity of your goals needs to be, spot on. So thanks for asking that question, Bridget. And let's see if we have any other questions that people have asked. Someone asked about our 4-school guarantee, whether clients get to choose the schools for the guarantee, or does Stratus choose some or part of the schools. Our clients choose what schools they apply to. Because we have a team that has representation from nearly all of the top 20 programs, our team is really knowledgeable about what's out there and what would be the right fit for our clients. So, we do encourage people to apply to a mix of schools. If you're going to apply to 6 schools, apply to 2 stretch schools, 2 target schools, and 2 likely schools. Ultimately, each of our clients own what schools they apply to, though. Another question here again from Bridget: how do you suggest you use the extra section? I.e., is there something not in your application that you'd like us to know? Bridget, there's actually an article on our website about how to respond to that optional essay. That is really intended for addressing things like a gap in your work experience, perhaps a low GPA, or something that happened during undergrad that impacted your performance. A choice of recommenders could be addressed in that optional essay. If you choose for some reason not to select your current immediate supervisor to write for you. So take a look at that article. This is not a place for you to say, oh, I wrote this great essay about growth for another school. Let me just put it in here because I love it so much. Trust me, I've seen people do that, and all you're going to do is piss off the person reading your application, that they have more stuff to read that they didn't ask for. Even if it is brilliantly written, it's not appreciated. So really the big things to address there are gaps in your work experience, any personal circumstances that the admissions committee should be made aware of, or choice of recommenders. Anything to add on that, Harold? An optional essay?
What I would say is only use it if you really have to use it. I think it's really that simple. Like all of us, we don't particularly want extra work, so you have to feel for the admissions committee member who's going to be looking at a lot of things. Obviously, if there is something that needs explaining, by all means, but even if you write it in an optional essay, keep it really short and sweet. No reason for a lot of prose around it. Just tell what happened, explain why, and then really let the rest of the application stand on its own.
Yeah. And one thing, one caveat there is last year, MIT had a quote optional essay that was very much like this. Is there anything else that you would like us to know? And that really wasn't optional at all. So it depends on what school that is. But I think, Bridget, you're asking about that optional essay. And if they give you 2 pages for your optional essay, you don't need to fill them out. If all you need to say is, I'm not using my current recommender because my current manager to write my recommendation because I've only been reporting to this individual for 2 months and they really don't know me very well. And you can leave it at that. Excellent. Any other questions that we might be able to answer here before we sign off? And there will be a quick poll at the end. We do appreciate your joining us, taking time out of working on your applications to spend 45 minutes or an hour with us during this tough time. We know that time is, it's short right now. So you got to remain focused, but if we can help you, please reach out if you feel like, hey, you need a little bit of extra support, someone to encourage you, across the finish line here. We'd love to give you a hand. And with that, anything to close, Harold?
What I would simply say is what we have found, the more time the more time that you spend on this, the higher quality application you get, it's the better results. I think that's in a nutshell. So for those of you who feel like they've taken a few good steps, then by all means apply round 2. For those of you who may be less confident in what they've done, by all means consider not applying round 2. But really the only way we can help you and the only way we can know for sure is give us a call. Like Susan has said, you get about 30 minutes for us for free, and we can do a pretty good assessment at that point and think about what next steps are, as well as how we can help you, because we really are here to help you and just help us understand how we can best do that.
Excellent. Thanks, Harold. And I want to thank Beat the GMAT for hosting us today. And I want to thank all of you for taking time out during this busy season to join us. And thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.